Hello, my dear students. Hope you all are fine today. Today, I have come forward to take a class on synthetic materials. If you have any queries or doubts related to the chapter after listening, then you may call me every night in between 8 to 10. My dear students, as you all know, you have learned regarding these synthetic materials in your previous classes. Synthetic materials are those materials that are made by combining different chemicals in the factories. If you go on talking about synthetic materials, there are many materials which are made out of mixing different chemicals. We know that these synthetic materials are made by mixing different chemicals. So there are different polymers of different synthetic materials. Now let us learn about these polymers. What are these polymers known as? So these polymers are again made up of many small parts or units known as monomers. These monomers, they combined end to end under certain conditions to form these polymers. Polymers can be classified into three categories as natural, synthetic, and semi-synthetic. And the process of the formation of these polymers is known as polymerization. Many of the substances in living beings are polymers. For example, you can talk about cellulose is a polymer of glucose, while in case of the living organisms, we find the hemoglobin is formed by amino acids, which are called as the building blocks of all proteins. In this chapter, we shall learn about semi-synthetic, synthetic, natural, and all different materials. We will study about the synthetic fibers and other materials which are all called as polymers. So my dear students, let's start with synthetic fibers. You all know that synthetic fibers are mostly made or used for making different materials like clothes and all. They may be entirely semi-synthetic or synthetic only. Semi-synthetic fibers like rayons are made by using natural polymers. But if you talk about synthetic fibers, they are made out of different chemicals only. But in case of the semi-synthetic, we find a mixture of natural as well as other synthetic fibers. Let us learn about the semi-synthetic fiber known as rayons. These semi-synthetic fibers are mostly categorized into three different varieties as viscose, cypramonium, shortly we can call as cupro, and acetate rayons. Viscose rayons are those rayons which are formed out of cellulose. When cellulose is dissolved in a mixture of sodium hydroxide and carbon disulfate, a viscose liquid is formed, and this viscose liquid, after its formation, is allowed to force out through spinners. These spinners have got many small holes, and it has been made or formed into thin filaments, and which is used as fibers, what we call as rayons. If you talk about synthetic fibers, there are many. Let us discuss about polyesters. This polyester is the first synthetic fiber obtained of the class and is obtained by the reaction between certain sets of organic compounds formed a mel which can be spun into filaments like terylene, dacron. These are the synthetic fibers which belong to polyester class. Secondly, we have got these polyamides, which is commonly known as nylon. This nylon 6 and nylon 6 are the most important fibers of this class. Nylon 6 is made of an organic compound which contains 6 carbonic atoms, or we can say carbon atoms, is made of more complicated monomer. It was the fiber which was first made in 1935 and was intended to use as a substitute for silk. Now, these nylon fibers are used for making parachutes as a substitute of silk. Now, my dear students, let's learn about some of the advantages of synthetic fibers. Synthetic fibers have many advantages. They are generally cheaper than natural fibers, and they are more durable. These synthetic fibers are not easily acted upon by any chemicals or moistures or bacteria. They are much stronger, and these synthetic fibers do not depend on any agricultural crop as cotton, flax and jute and all. Now we shall learn about some of the disadvantages of synthetic fibers. Along with the advantages, synthetic fibers also has many disadvantages. Let us learn one by one. Synthetic fibers are hydrophobic. Synthetic fibers are hydrophobic. That means they repel moisture. They do not absorb moisture, or they do not absorb sweat and all. So the clothes which are made of synthetic fibers, they are quite uncomfortable to wear because they are hydrophobic. It means that they do not absorb moisture. Secondly, if we talk about the clothes which are made of natural fibers as cotton, jute and all, cotton, silk and all, these are hydrophilic. That means they absorb moisture. They are able to evaporate our sweats when the clothes made of natural fibers are worn. Second topic regarding the disadvantages of synthetic fibers is clothes made of pure synthetic fibers are garishly lustrous. That means they shine in a very ugly way, and it also leads to the accumulation of some electric charges, which causes or leads to feel some irritation to our skin. So these are some of the disadvantages related to the synthetic fibers. Now we shall learn about the blends that are used for making comfortable clothing. As we have learned that the clothes which are made of synthetic fibers are quite uncomfortable to wear. So sometimes we know that some of the clothes are made out of a mixture of different polymers of natural as well as synthetic, which are known as semi-synthetic. So likewise, different blends are mixed for having a comfortable clothing, and such fibers are known as mixed fibers. Terylene, as you all know, is very commonly blended with cotton, silk and wool. So when it has been blended with cotton, this terylene is called as terrycot, or we can say terrycotton. When it has been blended with silk, it has been called terry silk, and when it has been blended with wool, it has been called as terry wool. So these clothes which are blended with different fibers of cotton, silk and wool, okay, are less lustrous than pure synthetic fibers. That means they do not shine like the clothes which are made of synthetic fibers. They are more comfortable as they absorb sweat. The are able to evaporate our sweats and all. They have heat setting properties, develop less electrical charges. That means it doesn't let us feel irritation to our skin when we wear it, and are again more durable than the natural fibers. Do we use synthetic fibers only for making clothes? No, we don't use these synthetic fibers only for making clothes. Other than clothes, it is also used for making many different materials. Let us learn one by one. Bed sheets, curtains, towels, cushions, furnitures, bandages, mosquito nets, and fishing nets. Likewise, we have got many uses of synthetic materials. It is used for making many different materials. And some other useful synthetic polymers are also mentioned here. So far we have learned about some of the polymers, but other than those polymers what you have learned, we have got many other different polymers like plastics. You all know these plastics are very common to us. We all have it, many different materials which are made of plastics. Plastics are synthetic materials that can be molded into a permanent shape. These are synthetic materials and it has been molded into a permanent shape. Different types of plastics are, again, we got to learn, and on the basis of how these plastics behave towards heat, it has been classified into two types called as thermoplastics, or we can simply call thermoplasts. Secondly, thermosetting plastics or thermosets. Students, let us learn about the difference between thermoplastics and thermosetting plastics. Thermoplastics are those plastic materials that are able to retain their plasticity even after repeated heating and cooling. Even if after repeated heating and cooling, they are able to retain their plasticity. That means we can mold such plastics again and again to give different shapes. But in case of thermosetting plastics, what happens is that thermosetting plastics, once they are set to a shape, they can't be retained into its previous shape. That means they are molded into a permanent shape which can't be returned into its previous shape. And such type of plastics are mostly used for making hard plastic materials. As you all know, bakelite. Bakelite is an example of thermosetting plastics. It is used for making hard plastic materials which we use in many electrical equipments like switches, switchboards, cords, plugs, and all. Apart from the usefulness of plastics, we have many hazards related to plastics. So these hazards means disadvantages. So let us learn some of the hazards related to the use of plastics. Plastics or its use have posed a threat to the health and environment at the present time. They are non-biodegradable substances. You have learned about it in your previous classes. What do you mean by non-biodegradable? Those substances which can't be decomposed by microorganisms or by any other processes. Such can be called as non-biodegradable. So plastics are amongst the one which are non-biodegradable. They cannot be broken down into simpler, harmless substances in the environment. So with a greater use of plastic materials, the garbage dump has an increase in its volume. It leads to the blockage of the drains that we have nearby our neighborhoods. When burnt, what happens? It produces a harmful gas, which is again harmful to the environment. And lastly, most chemicals used for preparing monomers which form plastics can cause cancer among the workers. That means the workers that we find in different plastic factories which do their work to make different plastic materials, these mostly suffer from cancer. So these are some of the hazards related to the use of plastic materials. Second polymer other than plastic is rubber. You all know what is a rubber. Rubbers are again of two different types. If you see the rubber that we get from the rubber trees, it can be called as natural rubber, and nowadays we are able to obtain this rubber by mixing chemicals also. So what it can be called as? It can be called as synthetic rubber. Natural rubbers are used before the invention of the synthetic rubbers. But after the invention of these synthetic rubbers, what happened is that natural rubbers are no more in use because synthetic rubbers are more easy to get it, and they are cheaper as well as they are more useful as compared to the natural rubbers. These natural rubbers are obtained from the latex of the rubber plant. This latex is a gummy juice which has been collected in a small pot lighting by hanging on the tree. So it has, after the pot has been collected with this latex, it has been used for making many materials out of rubber. So this natural rubber is obtained from the latex of rubber trees. Rubbers like neoprene, vinyl rubber and polybutadiene styrene are artificial rubber, what we can call as man-made rubber. So such rubbers are far better as compared to the natural rubbers. My dear students, let's learn about adhesives and lubricants. You all know that at the time when your books gets torn or any other plastic materials that you have in your homes gets broken, you try to join the broken parts using some adhesives. So these adhesives are nothing but these are gum-like things or gummy substances which helps in joining broken parts of different materials. We use some plant and animal extracts as adhesives and lubricants, but now we use synthetic polymers like silicone and epoxy resins for such purposes. Silicones are also used as shoe shines. You all know, before you come to school, after you wear your shoes, you used to polish your shoes. So the polish that you use in your shoes is known as shoe polish, right? So this shoe polish has got silicones which helps to give luster or shine to your shoes when you polish it. So these are some of the examples of adhesives and lubricants that you use at present. Now, if we talk about the rare materials for synthetic polymers, then these synthetic polymers are obtained firstly from natural gas and petroleum. And this natural gas and petroleum we get from the earth. So these are the rare materials that we use to obtain for synthetic polymers. The chemicals, rare materials needed for making synthetic polymers are obtained directly or indirectly from petroleum. In short, we can call crude oil and natural gas. So this crude oil and natural gas, these are the rare materials which we obtain directly or indirectly from the earth. And these substances taken together are called petroleum products. If the substances like crude oil and natural gas is taken out togetherly, then it has been called as petroleum products. You all know that natural gas, it contains mainly methane. Its formula is CH4. its main composition is methane, that is CH4. It can be converted into acetylene and formaldehyde. Methane can be converted into acetylene and formaldehyde. Acetylene is again used for making polythene, PVC, that is polyvinyl chloride, and acrylics. While if you talk about formaldehyde, is used for making bakelite, that is the hard plastic material. So by undergoing different processes, this petroleum is refined in the factories and different materials are extracted out of petroleum. Benzene is used for making nylon, naphthalene converted into phthalic acid, which is used for making polyester. Thus we see how dependent polymer technology is on petroleum products. So many of the synthetic materials that we get or that we are able to make different materials, okay, it's only because of these petroleum products. We are getting it from these petroleum products. Now let's learn about some important properties of synthetic materials. So far we have learned about the synthetic materials and its uses as well as its disadvantages and all. So what are the special properties that helps us to use these synthetic materials again and again? These synthetic materials, as you have learned in the advantages, that they are more durable, they are cheaper, they are not acted about any chemicals, moistures or bacteria and all. So apart from this, synthetic materials has got many other useful properties. The first useful property that synthetic materials have is the tensile strength. As you all know, if you take a thread in your hand and try to pull the thread harder, what will happen is that the thread will get torn or it will get broken. So how does it get broken? Because you have pulled the rope or the thread harder with your two hands, and the tensile strength of the rope has gone weaker. But if the tensile strength of the rope was more as compared to the force that you have used to pull, then what would have happened? The thread won't broke. So you can take different ropes of different fibers. So all the fibers do not have the same tensile strength. If you take the natural fibers and a synthetic fiber, suppose you have taken a natural fiber of cotton and you have taken a synthetic fiber of nylon, which one would have more tensile strength? Of course, you all know that is the nylon fiber. Nylon fiber would have more tensile strength. So this tensile strength is the pulling stress that is required to break a material. It's the pulling stress that you apply on the thread or the rope to break the thing or the material. The second property that is very useful for synthetic materials is action of water. You have learned under the advantages that synthetic materials do not act on any chemicals or moistures or any bacteria. They are not acted about. They are not reacted about any chemicals, moistures or bacteria. So if you talk about the second property that is very useful for synthetic materials is action of water. It doesn't react on the material. This water, it doesn't react on the material at all. For example, you take a wooden chair and a plastic chair. If you keep the wooden chair and the plastic chair, both the chairs outside on a rainy day, what you would observe? You would observe that the wooden chair would get wet very badly, that it will absorb all the waters. But in case of the plastic chair, it would remain as it is. You have kept. It won't have any reaction. So natural fibers absorb water quite efficiently, whereas synthetic fibers do not. absorb water at all. As I have given you the examples of hydrophobic and hydrophilic. Synthetic fibers are always hydrophobic. That means they repel moisture, and natural fibers are always hydrophilic. That means they absorb moisture. So this is one of the useful property of synthetic fibers or synthetic materials. Action of heat and flame. If you talk about the synthetic materials, different synthetic materials have different action on heat. As we all know that synthetic polymers are heat sensitive. That means on being heated, they melt at high temperatures and they burn. They catch fire very easily and they burn before getting melt. But if you talk about the fibers that we obtain from natural substances, like natural fibers as cotton, jute, silk and all, so such fibers are heat resistant. Vegetable fibers, that means the fibers that we obtain from the vegetables, they are heat resistant. They do not melt, nor they catch fire as easily as the synthetic materials do. Animal fibers are again heat sensitive. Animal fibers and synthetic fibers are always heat sensitive. Another property of synthetic materials is the thermal conductivity. The thermal conductivity of synthetic materials is the property of synthetic materials that helps or that gives us an idea of how easily the material is able to conduct heat. That is, it allows the passage of heat through it. How does it allow the passage of heat through it? Definitely, it has got different substances inside it, like the monomers we know, which are joined end to end to form the polymers. Different synthetic materials have got different polymers, and it has got many small parts known as monomers, which are the only things which helps in the passage of the heat. It allows the passage of heat through it. Synthetic polymers are generally bad conductors of heat. That is, they have got low thermal conductivity. They have got low thermal conductivity. It doesn't allow heat to pass through it. But if we talk about the metals and all, it easily allows heat to pass through it. We have learned about the insulators and the conductors. Metals that allows heat, they are known as heat as well as electricity, they are conductors. We simply call as good conductors or conductors. So same like this, in case of synthetic materials, we find that such materials do not conduct heat at all. They have got very low thermal conductivity. But if you talk about metals and alloys, they are always good conductors of heat. The last useful property of synthetic materials is electrical conductivity. These synthetic materials do not conduct electricity at all. This is why we have seen in our houses and in different places that most of the electrical equipments are made out of synthetic materials. For example, the insulation of wires, it is made up of either rubber or plastic and all. The switches that you have in your switch box, these are made of plastics, a very hard plastic, what is known as bakelite and all. So this is the reason that these synthetic materials, as they have got very low electrical conductivity, they are used for preparing such metals. It allows the electric current to pass through it. That means the electrical conductivity, it means that it allows the electric current to pass through it. Synthetic polymers are always insulators. That means they are bad conductors of electricity, and it is for this general behavior that plastics are always used for insulating electric wires and many other electrical equipments. My dear students, this is the end of the chapter. If you have any queries related to the chapter, you can call me at the time that I have set.